The future of the Star Wars galaxy begins now. Today we are diving into one of the most ambitious and beloved expanded universe projects ever created, Star Wars Legacy. Published by Dark Horse Comics, Star Wars Legacy pushed the timeline nearly a century beyond anything fans had ever seen before. At first, the idea worried people. Could such a bold leap break continuity? Would it clash with the ongoing stories like Legacy of the Force? Where does Legacy of the Force take place? Is it before NGO or after? It's really hard to know. It's not like each book has the title on the front of it.
There's just so many of them. It's hard to keep track of like what era they're in too, whether you're in Legacy or NJO, and even what people are talking about are so impossible to pin down because it's over 20 books. It's not like 6 movies. It's like 20 books.
But soon, Legacy became one of Dark Horse's best-selling series and is still remembered as one of the most celebrated works in the expanded universe. Behind the scenes, Sue Rustoni and Leland Chee reassured fans that everything was carefully coordinated with Lucasfilm and Del Rey Publishing. Even the creative team, who I'll reveal shortly, were active in online forums addressing fan concerns directly and promising that continuity and future stories were safe. Interestingly, the name Legacy was first conceived for the comic itself. Later, when brainstorming titles for Legacy of the Force, the larger idea of a Legacy era was born. The comic launched in June 2006, running 50 issues until August 2010, followed by the concluding 6-part miniseries Star Wars Legacy War from December 2010 to May 2011. Then, in 2012, Dark Horse announced a second iteration Legacy series, this time starring the great-great-granddaughter of Han and Leia Solo. Unfortunately, following Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm and the return of the Star Wars comic license to Marvel, this series was cancelled. But Legacy didn't exist in isolation. It was also part of Star Wars Vector, a 12-part crossover weaving through all 4 of Dark Horse's Star Wars comics at the time, proceeding with Knights of the Old Republic, then Dark Times, Rebellion, and Legacy. The crossover followed Celeste Morn, a character whose journey connected eras spanning thousands of years. Legacy had the honour of concluding the arc with its final 4 issues. Now, let's talk about the creative powerhouses behind Legacy. The series was written by John Ostrander and brought to life visually by his longtime collaborator, Jan Duursema. Together, they weren't new to the Star Wars galaxy. Before Legacy, they had already contributed heavily to the Republic comics during the Clone Wars multimedia project. Ostrander and Duursema didn't just tell stories, they created some of the expanded universe's most beloved characters. Most famously, they gave us Quinlan Vos, based on a background extra in The Phantom Menace. George Lucas himself reportedly loved the character, and Vos even earned a reference in Revenge of the Sith.
In short, they are going very well. Silukamai has fallen, and Master Vos has moved his troops to Bos Pitti.
They also introduced his apprentice, Ayla Secura, who crossed from comic panels to the big screen in Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith.
It's something that came a little later. When we started building Jedis, we had a lot of Jedis, and we needed more and more Jedis. As we were doing them toward the end, we ended up with a lot of Jedis that looked like people that worked at ILM, with these short little haircuts and looked like they stepped out from behind a computer. And so I was saying we have to get more exotic Jedis, and so we only have so much resources to do these things with, but I do have Twi'leks because we use them quite a bit in other areas in the Senate and as background action. So I have a sort of a wardrobe and a setup of certain kinds of characters. So it was a way of reinventing some of those characters. And I had realized that we had a comic book that has a Twi'lek in it that is a Jedi. There's a whole series actually of her. And I said, well, why don't we put her in this? I mean, she's a comic character, but we'll just fit her in and have her be a background character because that's exotic. That's how the Twi'lek Jedi ended up in the backgrounds of these shots, was to try to use some of the work and effort that the guys in the comic book world had put into things and characters they had created.
You know, we have lots of novels, lots of comic books, lots of games, and the movies and TV series, and there's a whole world of Star Wars now that didn't exist
When it came to Legacy, fans wanted a story centered on Luke's new Jedi Order, but Ostrander explained that doing so would interfere with what the Del Rey novel authors were building. Instead, he and Dursema created a new lead, Cade Skywalker. Originally conceived as Han Solo with a lightsaber, Cade is a flawed, reluctant hero, although some people might claim he's a rip-off of Dash Rendar.
Cade is a descendant of Luke Skywalker, and he's known as being somewhat of like a Dash Rendar ripoff.
But that's just not true. Dash Rendar was a stand-in for Han Solo during Shadows of the Empire as he was frozen in carbonite. Cade, on the other hand, is something entirely new, and you'll soon see why he's one of the most fascinating characters in the expanded universe.
Ryan Gosling could be playing Cade Skywalker, okay? And I want to go over why I think this, because I think there is actually some evidence to support this. He looks like Cade Skywalker. I'll be completely real with you. I'm not super familiar with Cade. Not something that like jumped into my mind.
So here's what you can expect from this video series. We'll be diving into Legacy issue by issue, or sometimes arc by arc, exploring both the storytelling and the incredible artwork that brought this bold new era of Star Wars to life. Whether you already love Legacy or are discovering it for the first time, I promise there's something here for you. So join me as we step into the far future of the galaxy far, far away. Please enjoy the remainder of this video where both Ostrander and Dursema will give their recollection of working on the expanded universe and Star Wars Legacy. Long live the expanded universe, and lang may your limbs reek.
I was a Star Wars fan from before the first movie coming out. I had come across the novelization at my local comic book store, and I thought the cover looked interesting, premise sounded good, so I picked it up, bought it, read it, and I said, wow, that's really cool. If they can get about 20% of what's in the book on the screen, it'll be pretty hot. Well, they got 200% of what was in the book onto the screen, and from that point on, I was definitely a Star Wars fan.
I have been a Star Wars fan since I first saw A New Hope in the theaters. When it first came out, I mean, I was an instant fan. I think I saw the first movie about 36 times.
My friend Tim Truman was writing Star Wars at one point, and he had to go away to do a special project, so he recommended me to fill in for him. I did, and then Tim decided not to come back, and so they made me the regular Star Wars writer. And then from there, it's hysteria, as we say. It's Jan Dursema. She's my regular artist. I've worked with a few others, but Jan is my regular one. And we just started coming with ideas and books and stuff and convinced them to let us do it, which was very nice of Lucasfilm Licensing.
I was offered one series of about 4 issues. And fortunately, I got in with Jan Dursema, who I already knew and had done some work with in other places. What I tried to suggest to Dark Horse when I came on writing is, at the time, they had, it was a rotating thing where you would have a different team of writers and artists coming in. And I suggested to them, first of all, have your own characters rather than sticking strictly with the characters from the films, because you can't control those. You have no control of those, and you can tell a story with them. But and then secondly, I said, look, whether it's me and Jan or some other team, have a regular team on there, because they will, if they're popular with the fans, they will draw fans in on a regular basis, and the number of people reading the book won't be contingent upon who is doing the book or what the story might be. The fans like a certain amount of consistency and trust on a monthly basis, and that's what keeps them there, I think, or one of the things that keeps them there. Jan and I became the regular team on it. We created character Quinlan Boss, among others, for the book. So they invited us in for a 4-issue story arc, and featured Quinlan Boss. And our idea of him was, okay, he's a Jedi, but he has amnesia, so he has the powers but not the memory of being a Jedi. So Jan saw Phantom Menace And she picked out a character from it to be Quinlan, so that Quinlan was actually in that story, although no one knew it. And the character, it's in a sort of cantina scene where Jar Jar is getting into trouble and stuff. The character she picked to play Quinlan was seated in the background at a table having dinner, and he's on for like maybe a second or two. And Jan, who can see a hummingbird's wings flap, caught him, took everything out that she needed, and designed him from that. So that's how good Jan is.
The one on the far left is a character named Quinlan Voss.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I was beginning to work for Dark Horse to do Star Wars comics, the writer, John Ostrander, and I wanted to know if we could make up a character for this 4-issue arc that we were going to do. And could we pick somebody out of episode 1, I think it was, and to use as a character and make up a whole story about them. And they said, yeah, sure, that sounds good, because you weren't allowed to use like Anakin at the time. You weren't allowed to use Darth Vader at the time. You just couldn't use them because Lucasfilm was still creating that world. So we had to create characters that were outside of that. They were inside the Star Wars universe, but outside of the movies. So we came up with this character. And how we came up with him was John and I went to the movie, went to see episode 1 and watched the whole thing. And I saw this guy in the outdoor cantina where Anakin, a young Anakin, is having an argument with Sebulba. Behind them in that scene was this guy. And he was just sitting at a table. And he looked like, to me, like for a moment there, he was going to get up from his table. He saw all that action happening. He was like, he was on alert. He was on guard. And I was like, that's a Jedi. So, so I made up this whole story about this character who lost his memory and didn't know he was a Jedi. And we open the story right where he's trapped in a burning building and he doesn't know who he is. And he quickly finds out that he can escape the building just by, jumping out of the flames and opening this hatch. And then he has to go and find out that he's a Jedi, and that his Padawan is missing. And that's Ayla. That's the Twi'lek character we saw on this first one on the left here. That's Ayla. That's his Padawan, and he has to go and find her. And the story was called Twilight, and it was supposed to be a 4-issue story, and that's all we were supposed to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
But the readers liked it so much that they asked us to do more. So we did, I think, of that arc, we did Twilight, we did Darkness, and then we did Rite of Passage, which was mostly about Ayla. That was her story, and how she came she went from a Padawan to a Jedi.
That was the first Star Wars story that Jan Duursema, my artist, and I did. And Ayla was, of course, part of it, but sort of background. And I was actually planning to kill Ayla off at the end of that story. And Jan told me that her daughter Sean, who was like maybe 10 at the time, Sean was going, don't kill her off. She's my favorite. There's so few girl Jedis. And so because Sean really didn't want Ayla to die, Ayla survived. Until, of course, they killed her in the movies and then continued shooting her when she was... That was just wrong. That's unfair.
And then later on, when that went to its natural ending because the films ended, the 3 prequel films were done, and it didn't look like they were going to be doing anything more. So our time in that era was done, and I don't want to go back. I want to know, like my storytelling thing, me as a reader, what I want to know is, what happened next? And what happened? So that's what I was interested in. And Jan and I talked it over, and we proposed, just drop kicking it down the timeline to another era, building and using elements of the continuity so that people would know it was Star Wars, but sort of developing it further. If this happened, what would be likely to happen next? Or given this situation, or given this character, then what happens? And so that's how we started to develop it. we proposed doing another series in Star Wars and kicking it down the timeline, because otherwise you're going to trip over continuity left, right, and center. Mm-hmm. So I said, well, let's go down about 100 years beyond what is being done and create our own vision of what it was, but make sure it's got all the Star Wars elements that people really love. So we did that, and although it played out of the continuity that had been established at that point, we were able to do it and make it work, particularly for Legacy. I'm very, very proud of Legacy. We expanded, so we created really a whole universe of characters. Sometimes even our main characters weren't even in the book. We could do things with others for an issue or two or three, and we did that, and people just felt that they were characters that they took to immediately. So I'm very proud of our Star Wars work.
I did the Star Wars leading up through the Clone Wars, and then after that we did Legacy, and after that we did Dawn of the Jedi, and and I also did Agent of the Empire, and a few other single issue one-offs.
Particularly for this series, Legacy, which is set about 140 years past the end of Return of the Jedi, we decided that, we wanted to see what a descendant of Luke Skywalker was, but we didn't want him, of course, to be Luke. So we said, well, what if Han Solo was a Jedi? So we wanted to start off with that concept, and that developed into Cade Skywalker. Cade is not a role model. He can be very dark, but he's a good soul trying to find his way, which eventually he does by the end of the series.
Cade Skywalker, who is like supposedly Luke's grandson, I think is what we had him as, and he was sort of the anti-Skywalker.
Han Solo with a lightsaber, make him scruffy, make him roguish.
He was a drug addict. He didn't particularly want to be a hero. He certainly didn't want to be a Jedi, and in fact, early on, he didn't even go by the name of Skywalker. Eventually, his friends found out, and that almost led to a falling out between him and his closest friends. The fact that he had Force ability and didn't show it.
Now, Cade Skywalker, he's the last Skywalker in the Star Wars universe. What does that do to the continuity with Luke Skywalker and his generation?
Well, in some of the novels, Luke has he has a son, Ben, and we assume that Ben would have children at some point. So Cade is sort of a natural progression. I always think of him as being a conflicted individual. He has a lot of issues with being a Jedi. He has a lot of issues with the destruction of the temple on Ossus, his death of his father, his mother abandoned him. I think if that hadn't happened, he'd be a very different person, but not totally different. I think he has something inside of him where he just has to question. Vader had questions about his actions. Cade has questions about life. They seem to take on personalities as John and I were working on it, and just became real people to us. We always say that with the best characters, that they write themselves. They put words in your ears so you can write them better. Mm-hmm. And that's what Cade and his crew have been like. They're just a lot of fun. There's a chance for snappy dialogue, and it reminds us a lot of the old, of the original trilogy.
God knows the money I spent on information books, on texts, references, encyclopedias and stuff. I mean, as much as I knew about Skywalker, first of all, Jan Duursema, my artist, knew 10 times more. I mean, you're absolutely. Yeah, so Jan knows a lot about it. I knew a lot about it. Everything that we did had to go through Lucasfilm. I mean, at every stage, Lucasfilm licensing. And they had to approve everything from, like, the story idea, to the plot, to the script, to the pencils, to the inks, to the colors, to the lettering, everything had to go through them. And they would give us notes, and if they felt that something was wrong, and it would come back to us. The thing is, they would make a note, they'd say something to Jan and me, and go, well, no, you can't really do that. And we said, well, yeah, but you already did that in this episode, and this happened here, and they did that, so this is just the same thing. And they think about it and they go, okay,
There are certain things that will work in one universe better than in another universe. But you have to be you have to know the characters. You have to know what they do. There needs to be a continuity in those characters. You're trying to fit it into the universe in which you're writing. So yeah, there are differences from universe to universe to universe, but each one of those places has its own rules, guidelines, a feel for it. You know, again, with Star Wars, Jan Dursman and I were able to create good Star Wars stories because we knew Star Wars. You know, if your character can be fitted into any one of those universes, well, okay, that's not much of a character, really. There were certain things established about them, and I don't feel that you can just ignore it and go off and do your own thing. I think that you have to respect what the characters are and what they've done. In Star Wars, no, that's a very tightly controlled unit. Everything that we did, from the plot to the script to the pencils to the ink to the colors to the letters to the cover, had to be approved by Lucasfilm. To the point where they just said, "Are you sure about this?" And we go, "Yeah." And they go, "Fine." You know, they would just let us go because they trusted us. And we had earned that trust, but they did trust us to do it, and that's why we got to do things like Legacy, like Agent of the Empire, like Dawn of the Jedi. That's because they trusted us to know what was Star Wars and what was not Star Wars.
And I'm sure that you've probably heard this from fans, like, you know, like stuff that's considered not canon anymore. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's all canon. You know what I mean? Like, I love that Star Wars stuff, and Legacy. It is my favorite series of the Dark Horse stuff, and I think it's because it felt like Star Wars, but it also felt very different. You know, it felt like its own thing.
As far as I'm concerned, it is all Star Wars.
And my question about that is, your stuff is all part of the much, not maligned, but like now gone EU. That people, that as a creator who spent 10 years building characters, what was it like? I mean, were you angry, or were you okay with it when they basically came out and said the Disney stuff is just, that stuff is all jettisoned? It's not, you know, it's still there to be enjoyed and people still enjoy it, but any ties it might have had or anything that you might have added to are gone.
I have an opinion about it, sure, but my basic feeling is I don't own Star Wars. I didn't own the characters, even the ones that I created. You know, it wasn't mine. So they had and still have the right to do what they want, what they think is right for the franchise. You know, whether I agree or not. You know, and I can understand sort of they're doing it. I mean, they were moving to a whole new publisher at that point. They didn't want to get weighed down with a lot of continuity, and believe me, even for someone who's working in it constantly, you know, you were. I was sometimes neck high in continuity, and trying to keep my feet, and it's so I can see them going, well, we want a new feel. We want it to feel new. We want it to be accessible to other people, and so okay, I can understand why they did it. I don't know if it's the best choice.